Robbie by Isaac Asimov. 98, 99, 100. Gloria withdrew her chubby little forearm from before her eyes and stood for a moment, wrinkling her nose and blinking in the sunlight. Then, trying to watch in all directions at once, she withdrew a few cautious steps from the tree against which she had been leaning. She craned her neck to investigate the possibilities of a clump of bushes to the right, and then withdrew farther to obtain a better angle for viewing its dark recesses. Gloria thought, "I bet he went inside the house, and I've told him 1,000,000 times that that's not fair." With tiny lips pressed together tightly, she moved determinedly toward the two-story building up past the driveway. Too late, she heard the rustling sound behind her, followed by the distinctive and rhythmic clump-clump of Robbie's metal feet. The tall robot had left his hiding place and was running toward the tree. Gloria shrieked in dismay. "Wait, Robbie. That wasn't fair, Robbie. You promised you wouldn't run until I found you." Gloria started to run toward the tree, but Robbie was much faster. Then, within 10 feet of the goal, Robbie's pace slowed suddenly, and Gloria, with one final burst of wild speed, ran past him and touched the tree first. Gleefully, she turned on the faithful Robbie, rewarded him for his sacrifice by taunting him cruelly for a lack of running ability. "Robbie can't run," she shouted at the top of her 8-year-old voice. "I can beat him any day. I can beat him any day." Robbie didn't answer, of course, not in words. He moved away until Gloria found herself running after him, but she moved too slowly and couldn't catch him. "Robbie," at least she squealed. "Stand still," and the laughter was forced out of her. Until he turned suddenly and caught her up, whirling her round, so that for her the world fell away for a moment, with the blue emptiness beneath and green trees stretching hungrily downward toward the void. Then she was down in the grass again, leaning against Robbie's leg and still holding on a hard metal finger. After a while she shouted, "Stand still, it's my turn to hide now, because you've got longer legs and you promised not to run till I found you." Robbie nodded his head and obediently faced the tree. "Don't peek now, and don't skip any numbers," warned Gloria, and scurried for cover. After exactly 100 seconds, the robot's red eyes opened and he looked around. Immediately he knew that Gloria was behind a large rock. He saw part of her dress. Slowly, Robbie moved towards the little girl's hiding place. He pointed one arm toward her and banged his other arm against his metal leg. Gloria emerged sulkily. "You peeked," she exclaimed. "Besides, I'm tired of playing hide and seek. I want to ride." But Robbie was hurt at the unjust accusation, so he seated himself carefully and shook his head from side to side. Gloria changed her tone immediately. "Come on, Robbie. I didn't mean it about the peeking. Give me a ride." Robbie was not to be won over so easily, though. He gazed stubbornly at the sky and shook his head even more emphatically. "Please, Robbie, please give me a ride." She encircled his neck with rosy arms and hugged tightly. Then, changing moods in a moment, she moved away. "If you don't, I'm going to cry." Hard-hearted Robbie paid scant attention to this dreadful possibility and shook his head a third time. Gloria found it necessary to play her trump card. "If you don't," she exclaimed warmly, "I won't tell you any more stories. That's all. Not one." Robbie gave in immediately and unconditionally before this ultimatum, nodding his head vigorously until the metal of his neck hummed. Carefully, he raised the little girl and placed her on his broad, flat shoulders. Then he ran to some tall grass that grew on the other side of the yard. He stopped and gently put Gloria down onto the soft grass. Gloria laughed happily. Robbie waited and then gently pulled her hair. "You want something?" said Gloria. He pulled the curl harder. "Oh, I know, you want a story." Robbie nodded rapidly. "Which one?" Robbie made a semicircle in the air with one finger. The little girl protested. "Again? I've told you Cinderella 1,000,000 times. Aren't you tired of it? It's for babies." Another semicircle. "Oh well," Gloria composed herself, ran over the details of the tale in her mind, and began. "Are you ready? Well, once upon a time there was a beautiful little girl whose name was Ella, and she had a terribly cruel stepmother and two very ugly and very cruel stepsisters. And Gloria was reaching the very climax of the tale. Midnight was striking and everything was changing back to the originals, while Robbie listened with burning eyes when the interruption came. "Gloria," it was a high-pitched sound of a woman who has been calling not once but several times, and had the nervous tone of one in whom anxiety was beginning to overcome impatience. "Mamma's calling me," said Gloria, not quite happily. "You'd better carry me back to the house, Robbie." Robbie obeyed. Gloria's father was rarely home in the daytime except on Sunday, today for instance, and when he was, he proved a genial and understanding person. Gloria's mother, Grace Weston, however, was a source of uneasiness to Robbie. The robot nanny and the child reached the house. "Where were you, Gloria?" she said severely. "I was with Robbie," quavered Gloria. "I was telling him Cinderella, and I forgot it was dinner time." "Well, it's a pity Robbie forgot too." Then, as if that reminded her of the robot's presence, she whirled upon him. "You may go, Robbie. She doesn't need you now." Then, brutally, "And don't come back until I call you." Robbie turned to go, but hesitated as Gloria cried out, "Wait, Mama, you got to let him stay. I didn't finish Cinderella for him. I said I would tell him Cinderella, and I'm not finished." "Gloria, honest and truly, Mama, he'll stay so quiet you won't even know he's here. He can sit on the chair in the corner, and he won't say a word. I mean, he won't do anything. Will you, Robbie?" Robbie nodded his massive head up and down once. "Gloria, if you don't stop this at once, you shan't see Robbie for a whole week." The girl's eyes fell. "All right, but Cinderella is his favorite story and I didn't finish it, and he likes it so much." The robot left with a disconsolate step, and Gloria choked back a sob. George Weston was comfortable. It was a habit of his to be comfortable on Sunday afternoons. A good hearty dinner, a nice soft couch, a copy of the Times, slippered feet and shirtless chest. How could anyone help but be comfortable? He wasn't pleased, therefore, when his wife walked in. After 10 years of married life, he still was so foolish as to love her, and there was no question that he was always glad to see her. Still, Sunday afternoons just after dinner was sacred to him, and his idea of solid comfort was to be left in solitude for 2 or 3 hours. Consequently, he fixed his eye firmly upon the latest reports of the Lefebvre Yoshida expedition to Mars. This one was to take off from Lunar Base and might actually succeed, and pretended she wasn't there. Mrs. Weston waited patiently for 2 minutes, then impatiently for 2 more, and finally broke the silence. George. George, I say, will you put down that paper and look at me? Weston turned a weary face toward his wife. What is it, dear? You know what it is, George. It's Gloria and that terrible machine. What terrible machine? Now don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. It's that robot Gloria calls Robbie. He doesn't leave her for a moment. Well, why should he? He is not supposed to. And he certainly isn't a terrible machine. He's the best robot money can buy, and I'm sure he's set me back half a year's income. He's worth it, though. Sight cleverer than half my office staff. He made a move to pick up the paper again, but his wife was quicker and grabbed it away. You listen to me, George. I won't have my daughter entrusted to a machine, and I don't care how clever it is. It has no soul, and no one knows what it may be thinking. My child just isn't made to be guarded by a thing of metal. Weston frowned. When did you decide this? He's been with Gloria 2 years now, and I haven't seen you worried till now. It was different at first. It was a novelty, and it was a fashionable thing to do. But now I don't know. The neighbors. Well, what have the neighbors to do with it? Now, look. A robot is infinitely more to be trusted than a human nursemaid. Robbie was constructed for only one purpose, really, to be the companion of a little child. His entire mentality has been created for the purpose. He just can't help being faithful and loving and kind. He's a machine made so. That's more than you can say for humans. But something might go wrong. That Mrs. Weston was a bit hazy about the insides of a robot. That awful thing will go crazy, and she couldn't complete the quite obvious thought. Nonsense, Weston denied. That's completely ridiculous. We had a long discussion about the time we bought Robbie, about the first law of robotics. You know that it's impossible for a robot to harm a human being. Besides, I have an engineer from US Robots here twice a year to give the poor gadget a complete overhaul. Why, there's no more chance of anything at all going wrong with Robbie than there is of you or I suddenly going crazy, considerably less, in fact. Besides, how are you going to take him away from Gloria? That's just it, George. She won't play with anyone else. There are dozens of little boys and girls that she would make friends with, but she won't. She won't go near them unless I make her. That's no way for a little girl to grow up. You want her to be normal, don't you? You want her to be able to take her part in society. Grace, pretend Robbie is a dog. I've seen hundreds of children who would rather have their dog than their father. A dog is different, George. We must get rid of that horrible thing. You can sell it back to the company. I've asked, and you can. You've asked? Now look here, Grace. Let's not go off the deep end. We're keeping the robot until Gloria is older, and I don't want the subject brought up again. And with that, he walked out of the room in a huff. Mrs. Weston met her husband at the door 2 evenings later. You'll have to listen to this, George. There's bad feeling in the village. About what? Asked Weston. He stepped into the washroom. Mrs. Weston waited. She said, about Robbie. Weston stepped out, towel in hand, face red and angry. What are you talking about? Oh, it's been building up and building up. I've tried to close my eyes to it, but I'm not going to anymore. Most of the villagers consider Robbie dangerous. Children aren't allowed to go near our place in the evenings. We trust our child with the thing. Well, people aren't reasonable about these things. Then to hell with them. Saying that doesn't solve the problem. I've got to do my shopping down there. I've got to meet them every day. And it's even worse in the city these days when it comes to robots. New York has just passed an ordinance keeping all robots off the streets between sunset and sunrise. All right, but they can't stop us from keeping a robot on our home. Grace, this is one of your campaigns. I recognize it, but it's no use. The answer is still no. We're keeping Robbie. 10 times in the ensuing week he cried, Robbie stays, and that's final. Came the day at last when Weston approached his daughter guiltily and suggested a beautiful show in the village. Gloria clapped her hands happily. Can Robbie go? No, dear, he said. They won't allow robots at the show, but you can tell him all about it when you get home. Gloria came back from town bubbling over with enthusiasm, for the show had been a gorgeous spectacle indeed. She waited for her father to maneuver the jet car into the garage. Wait till I tell Robbie, Daddy. He would have liked it like anything. Especially when Francis Fran was backing away so quietly and backed right into one of the leopard men and had to run. She laughed again. Daddy, are there really leopard men on the moon? Probably not, said Weston absently. It's just funny make-believe. He couldn't take much longer with the car. He'd have to face it. Gloria ran across the lawn. Robbie, Robbie. Then she stopped suddenly at the sight of a beautiful collie which regarded her out of serious brown eyes as it wagged its tail on the porch. Oh, what a nice dog! Gloria climbed the steps, approached cautiously, and patted it. Is it for me, Daddy? Her mother had joined them. Yes, it is, Gloria. Isn't it nice, soft and furry? It's very gentle. It likes little girls. Can he play games? Surely, he can do any number of tricks. Would you like to see some? Right away. I want Robbie to see him too. Robbie. She stopped uncertainly and frowned. I'll bet he's just staying in his room because he's mad at me for not taking him to the show. You'll have to explain to him, Daddy. He might not believe me, but he knows if you say it, it's so. Weston's sleep grew tighter. He looked toward his wife, but could not catch her eye. Gloria turned and ran down the basement steps, shouting as she went, Robbie, come and see what Daddy and Mama brought me. They brought me a dog, Robbie. In a minute she had returned, a frightened little girl. Mama, Robbie isn't in his room. Where is he? There was no answer, and George Weston coughed and was suddenly extremely interested in an aimlessly drifting cloud. Gloria's voice quavered on the verge of tears. Where's Robbie, Mama? Mrs. Weston sat down and drew her daughter gently to her. Don't feel bad, Gloria. Robbie has gone away, I think. Gone away? Where? Where's he gone away, Mama? No one knows, darling. He just walked away. We've looked and we've looked and we've looked for him, but we can't find him. You mean he'll never come back again? Her eyes were round with horror. We may find him soon. We'll keep looking for him. And meanwhile, you can play with your nice new doggy. Look at him. His name is Lightning, and he can... But Gloria's eyelids had overflown. I don't want the dog. I want Robbie. I want you to find me Robbie. Her feelings became too deep for words, and she cried. Mrs. Weston glanced at her husband for help, but he did not withdraw his stare from the heavens. So she bent to the task of consolation. Why do you cry, Gloria? Robbie was only a machine, just an old machine. He wasn't alive at all. He was not no machine, screamed Gloria, fiercely and ungrammatically. He was a person just like you and me, and he was my friend. I want him back. "Oh, Mama, I want him back." Her mother silently cried in defeat and left Gloria to her sorrow. "Let her have her cry out," she told her husband. "Childish griefs are never lasting. In a few days she'll forget that awful robot ever existed." But time proved Mrs. Weston a bit too optimistic. To be sure, Gloria ceased crying, but she ceased smiling too, and the passing days found her ever more silent and shadowy. Gradually, her attitude of passive unhappiness wore Mrs. Weston down, and all that kept her from yielding was the impossibility of admitting defeat to her husband. Then, one evening, she went into the living room, sat down, folded her arms, and looked boiling mad. Her husband stretched his neck in order to see her over his newspaper. "What now, Grace?" "It's that child, George. I've had to send back the dog today. Gloria positively couldn't stand the sight of him," she said. "She's driving me into a nervous breakdown." Weston laid down the paper, and a hopeful gleam entered his eye. Maybe we ought to get Robbie back. It might be done, you know. I can get in touch with—" "No," she replied angrily. "I won't hear of it. We're not giving up that easily. My child shall not be brought up by a robot, if it takes years to break her of it." Weston picked up his paper again, with a disappointed air. "A year of this will age me prematurely." "You're a big help, George," was the answer. "What Gloria needs is a change of environment. Of course, she can't forget Robbie here. How can she when every tree and rock reminds her of him? It's really the silliest situation I have ever heard of. Imagine a child pining away for the loss of a robot." "Well, what's the change in environment you're planning?" "We're going to take her to New York. The city, in August. Say, do you know what New York is like in August? It's unbearable. Millions to bear it. They don't have a place like this to go to. If they didn't have to stay in New York, they wouldn't." "Well, we have to. I say we're leaving now, or as soon as we can make the arrangements. In the city, Gloria will find sufficient interests and sufficient friends to perk her up and make her forget that machine." "Oh, Lord." "We have to. Gloria has lost 5 pounds in the last month, and my little girl's health is more important to me than your comfort." "It's a pity you didn't think of your little girl's health before you deprived her of her pet robot," he muttered, but to himself. Gloria displayed signs of improvement when told of the trip to the city. She spoke little of it, but when she did, it was always with lively anticipation. Again, she began to smile and to eat with something of her former appetite. Mrs. Weston hugged herself for joy and lost no opportunity to triumph over her still skeptical husband. "You see, George, she helps with the packing like a little angel and chatters away as if she hadn't a care in the world. It's just as I told you." Was the skeptical response. "I hope so." Preliminaries were gone through quickly. Arrangements were made for the preparation of their city home, and the couple were engaged as housekeepers for the country home. When the day of the trip finally did come, Gloria was all but her old self again, and no mention of Robbie passed her lips at all. In high good humor, the family took a taxi to the airport and entered the waiting liner. "Come, Gloria," called Mrs. Weston. "I've saved you a seat near the window so you can watch the scenery." Gloria trotted down the aisle cheerily, flattened her nose into a white oval against the thick clear glass, and watched that increased as the sudden coughing of the motor drifted backward into the interior. She was too young to be frightened when the ground dropped away as if led through a trapdoor, and she herself suddenly became twice her usual weight, but not too young to be mightily interested. It wasn't until the ground had changed into a tiny patchwork quilt that she withdrew her nose and faced her mother again. "Will we soon be in the city, Mamma?" she asked, rubbing her chilled nose. "In about half an hour, dear." After a little pause, she asked, "Aren't you glad we're going? Don't you think you'll be very happy in the city, with all the buildings and people and things to see? We'll go to the shows every day and go to the circus and the beach and—" "Yes, Mamma," was Gloria's unenthusiastic rejoinder. The liner passed over a bank of clouds at the moment, and Gloria was instantly absorbed in the usual spectacle of clouds underneath one. Then they were over clear sky again, and she turned to her mother with a sudden mysterious air of secret knowledge. "I know why we're going to the city, Mamma." "Do you?" Mrs. Weston was puzzled. "Why, dear?" "You didn't tell me because you wanted it to be a surprise, but I know." For a moment she was lost in admiration at her own acute penetration, and then she laughed gaily. "We're going to New York so we can find Robbie, aren't we? With detectives." The statement caught George Weston in the middle of a drink of water, with disastrous results. There was a geyser of water, and then a bout of choking coughs. When all was over, he stood there, a red-faced, water-drenched, and very, very annoyed person. Mrs. Weston maintained her composure, but when Gloria repeated her question in a more anxious tone of voice, she found her temper rather bent. "Maybe," she answered. "Now sit and be still, for heaven's sake." New York City, 1996 AD, was a paradise for the tourists more than ever in its history. Gloria's parents realized this and made the most of it. On direct orders from his wife, George Weston arranged to have his business take care of itself for a month or so, in order to be free to spend the time with them. Like everything else Weston did, this was gone about in an efficient, thorough, and businesslike way. Before the month had passed, nothing that could be done had not been done. She was taken to the top of the half-mile tall Roosevelt building. They visited the zoos, where Gloria started in delicious fright at the real live lion, rather disappointed that the keepers fed him raw steaks instead of human beings, as she had expected, and asked insistently and peremptorily to see the whale. The various museums came in for their share of attention, together with the parks and the beaches and the aquarium. She was taken halfway up the Hudson in an excursion steamer fitted out in the archaism of the mid-20s. She traveled into the stratosphere on an exhibition trip where the sky turned deep purple and the stars came out and the misty earth below looked like a huge ball. Down under the waters of the Long Island Sound, she was taken in a glass-walled subsea vessel, where in a green world quaint and curious sea things watched her. In fact, when the month had nearly sped, the Westons were convinced that everything conceivable had been done to take Gloria's mind once and for all off the departed Robbie, but they were not quite sure they had succeeded. The fact remained that wherever Gloria went, she displayed the most absorbed and concentrated interest in such robots as happened to be present. No matter how exciting the spectacle before her, nor how novel to her girlish eyes, she turned away instantly if the corner of her eye caught a glimpse of a metallic movement. Mrs. Weston went out of her way to keep Gloria away from all robots, and the matter was finally climaxed in the episode at the Museum of Science and Industry. The museum had announced a special children's program in which exhibits of scientific witchery scaled down to the child mind were to be shown. The Westons, of course, placed it upon their list of absolutely. It was while the Westons were standing totally absorbed in a powerful electromagnet that Mrs. Weston suddenly became aware of the fact that Gloria was no longer with her. Initial panic gave way to calm decision, and, enlisting the aid of 3 attendants, a careful search was begun. Gloria, of course, was not one to wander aimlessly, however. For her age, she was an unusually determined and purposeful girl, quite full of the maternal genes in that respect. She had seen a huge sign on the 3rd floor, which had said "This way to the talking robot." Having spelled it out to herself, and having noticed that her parents did not seem to wish to move in the proper direction, she did the obvious thing. Waiting for an opportune moment of parental distraction, she calmly went and followed the sign. The talking robot was a tour de force, a thoroughly impractical device possessing publicity value only. Once an hour, an escorted group stood before it and asked questions of the robot engineer in charge in careful whispers. Those the engineer decided were suitable for it was a talking robot. This robot didn't look like any robot Gloria had ever seen. Cautiously and doubtfully she raised her voice. "Please, Mr. Robot, sir, are you the talking robot, sir?" She wasn't sure, but it seemed to her that a robot that actually talked was worth a great deal of politeness. A mechanical voice boomed out in words that lacked accent and intonation. "I am the robot that talks." Gloria stared at it ruefully. It did talk, but the sound came from inside somewheres. There was no face to talk to. She said, "Can you help me, Mr. Robot, sir?" The talking robot was designed to answer questions, and only such questions as it could answer had ever been put to it. It was quite confident of its ability. Therefore, "I can help you." "Thank you, Mr. Robot, sir. Have you ever seen Robbie?" "Who is Robbie?" "He is a robot, Mr. Robot, sir." She stretched to tiptoes. "He's about so high, Mr. Robot, sir, only higher, and he's very nice. He's got a head, you know. I mean, you haven't, but he has, Mr. Robot, sir." The talking robot had been left behind. "A robot." "Yes, Mr. Robot, sir. A robot just like you, except he can't talk, of course, and looks like a real person. A robot like me." "Yes, Mr. Robot, sir." Gloria stood waiting with carefully concealed impatience for the machine's answer when she heard the cry behind her of "There she is," and recognized that cry as her mother's. "What are you doing here, you bad girl?" cried Mrs. Weston, anxiety dissolving at once into anger. "Do you know you frightened your mamma and daddy almost to death? Why did you run away?" The robot engineer yelled, "Can't nobody read signs? You're not allowed in here without an attendant." Gloria raised her voice. "I only came to see the talking robot, Mama. I thought he might know where Robbie was, because they're both robots." She burst into a sudden storm of tears. "And I got to find Robbie, Mama. I got to." Mrs. Weston strangled a cry and said, "Oh, good heavens! Come home, George. This is more than I can stand." That evening, George Weston left for several hours, and the next morning he approached his wife with something that looked suspiciously. "I've got an idea, Grace." "About what?" was the uninterested query. "About Gloria." "You're not going to suggest buying back that robot?" "No, of course not." "Then go ahead. I might as well listen to you. Nothing I've done seems to have done any good." All right, here's what I've been thinking. The whole trouble with Gloria is that she thinks of Robbie as a person and not as a machine. Naturally, she can't forget him. Now, if we manage to convince her that Robbie was nothing more than a mess of steel and copper in the form of sheets and wires with electricity, its juice of life, how long would her longing last? It's the psychological attack, if you see my point. How do you plan to do it? Simple. Where do you suppose I went last night? I persuaded Robertson of US Robots and Mechanical Men to arrange for a complete tour of his premises tomorrow. The three of us will go, and by the time we're through, Gloria will see that a robot is not alive. Mrs. Weston's eyes widened gradually, and something glinted in her eyes that was quite like sudden admiration. Why, George, that's a good idea. Mr. Struthers was a general manager and naturally inclined to be a bit talkative. The combination, therefore, resulted in a tour that was fully explained, perhaps even overabundantly explained, at every step. However, Mrs. Weston was not bored. Indeed, she stopped him several times and begged him to repeat his statements in simpler language so that Gloria might understand. Under the influence of this appreciation of his narrative powers, Mr. Struthers expanded genially and became ever more communicative if possible. George Weston himself showed a gathering impatience. "Pardon, Miss Struthers," he said, breaking into the middle of a lecture on the photoelectric cell. "Haven't you a section of the factory where only robot labor is employed?" Oh, yes. Yes, indeed." He smiled at Mrs. Weston. "Robots creating more robots. Of course, we are not making a general practice out of it. For one thing, the unions would never let us. But we can turn out a very few robots using robot labor exclusively, merely as a sort of scientific experiment, you see." He tapped his pince-nez into one palm argumentatively. "What the labor unions don't realize, and I say this as a man who has always been very sympathetic with the labor movement in general, is that the advent of the robot, while involving some—" "Yes, Struthers," said Weston. "But about that section of the factory you speak of, may we see it? It would be very interesting, I'm sure." Yes, of course." Mr. Struthers said, "Follow me, please." He was comparatively quiet while leading the three through a long corridor and down a flight of stairs. Then, when they had entered a large well-lit room that buzzed with metallic activity, the doors opened and the flood of explanation poured forth again. "There you are," he said with pride in his voice. "Robots only. 5 men act as overseers, and they don't even stay in this room. In 5 years, that is, since we began this project, not a single accident has occurred. Of course, the robots here assembled are comparatively simple, but—" The general manager's voice had long died to a rather soothing murmur in Gloria's ears. The whole trip seemed rather dull and pointless to her, though there were many robots in sight. None were ever remotely like Robbie, though, and she surveyed them. In this room, there weren't any people at all, she noticed. Then her eyes fell upon 6 or 7 robots busily engaged at a round table halfway across the room. It was a big room. She couldn't see for sure, but one of the robots looked like it was Robbie. Her shriek pierced the air, and one of the robots about the table faltered and dropped the tool he was holding. Gloria went almost mad with joy. She ran toward her Robbie, arms waving and hair flying, and the 3 horrified adults, as they stood frozen in their tracks, saw what the excited little girl did not see: a huge tractor bearing blindly down upon its appointed track. It took split seconds for Weston to come to his senses, and those split seconds meant everything, for Gloria could not be overtaken. Mr. Struthers signalled wildly to the overseers to stop the tractor, but the overseers were only human and it took time to act. It was only Robbie that acted immediately and with precision. With metal legs eating up the space between himself and his little mistress, he charged down from the opposite direction. Everything then happened at once. His long legs had taken him to the little girl. He caught one of her arms and pulled her from the path of the tractor. Half a second later, the tractor drove over the exact place where Gloria had stood. Gloria's parents ran to her and held her tightly. Gloria didn't realize that she had been in danger and loved, and she had found her friend Robbie. But Mrs. Weston's expression had changed from one of relief to one of dark suspicion. She turned to her husband. "You planned this, didn't you? Robbie wasn't designed for engineering or construction work. He couldn't be of any use to them. You had him placed here deliberately so that Gloria would find him. You know you did." "Well, I did," said Weston. "But Grace, how was I to know the reunion would be so violent? And Robbie has saved her life. You'll have to admit that. You can't send him away again." Grace Weston considered. She turned toward Gloria and Robbie and watched them for a moment. "Well," said Mrs. Weston at last, "I guess he can stay with us until he rusts." Of course he didn't. That was 1998. By 2002, the mobile speaking robot had been invented, of course, made all the known speaking models out of date, which seemed to be final straw as far as the non-robot elements were concerned. Most of the world governments banned robots' use on Earth for any purpose other than scientific research between 2003 and 2007, so that Gloria had to give up Robbie eventually. It was easier for her at the age of 15 than at 8.